Over 170 years ago, Henry David Thoreau observed, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." Is this you? Do you feel trapped in the rat race we call life? Are you truly the person you desire to be? Are you unhappy with where you find yourself physically, mentally, or spiritually? Let's make the life changes necessary to empower you with happiness and contentment, belief and confidence in yourself. Join the discussion with countless other people who want nothing more than to be the best version of themselves that they can be. Welcome to Better with Jimmy Blackman. Welcome to Better, folks. Another edition coming at you today with someone who needs little introduction, Dean Karnazes. Many of you may know him as the ultra runner, one of the originals that really made a mark in the sport. And I'm really excited about this because Dean's a couple of years older than me, but we were running at the same time in my competitive years, and I got to watch his career, and I say the feats that he accomplished along the way. Of course, Dean has an amazing story of what took him there, and we'll explore that today. But along the way, so many things to note. He was Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, and I love it because his influence was an influence that made people make choices to do things in their life, like not just be inspired, but to actually go and take action. And that's very important at Better and what we're trying to do for people and to inspire and motivate them to take action. He's won an ESPN Espy Award, of course, documentaries on his life, 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states. And many of you are thinking, wow, 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days. And as a distance runner myself, I'm really impressed with that. But what I'm really impressed with is the logistics that it took to do 50 marathons in 50 states. That is a logistical feat, folks. He has run ultra marathons. Ran a marathon at the South Pole, ran around he circled the globe nude. So he can tell you all about that. And he has won the Badwater 135, where you go from through Death Valley in unbelievable temperatures, ran completely out of his melted shoes at one point there, and then end at the highest point in North America. He's done the Western states 10 or 12 times. I mean, we could just go on and on. He's been on television shows that you've probably seen him being interviewed on, TED Talks and everything else. Dean, it is humbling, and I'm honored to have you on the show. So welcome.
I said you can embellish freely on the introduction, and you took me up on the offer. But thank you. I'm not
Very
worthy.
impressive.
Yeah.
Well, Dean, let's start there, where, as I've told my listeners, that I get the story from so many businessmen and women that have reached a point in their life where they're secure, potentially they're doing financially very well, but they're unhappy. And when we talk about happiness here, we're talking physically, mentally, spiritually. And you reached that point when you were 30 years old, and just an incredible story. I would go ahead and set it up by saying you grew up a runner, but then departed for a while, then got your undergrad, got an MBA, landed a great corporate job, and were set up for success. And on your 30th birthday party, I'm really interested to know what went through your mind and the choices that you made that night. So please share it with us.
Yeah, I think you outlined it perfectly. I I had a very comfortable corporate job in San Francisco, and I had all of the golden handcuffs, if you will. I had a fat paycheck, stock options, free company car, healthcare, 401k matching program, and I should have been happy, right? We're kind of told, if you follow this prescription, you get a good degree, you get a good job, you make a lot of money, and you'll be happy. And the formula wasn't really working out too well for me. So I was, as you said, I was in a bar my 30th birthday, doing what a lot of folks do on their 30th birthday. I was in there drinking with my buddies, and at midnight, I told them I was leaving. And they said, well, where are you going? The night is still young. Let's have another round of tequila to celebrate. And I said, no, I'm gonna run 30 miles to celebrate instead. And they looked at me and they said, but you're not a runner. You're drunk. And I said, I am, but I'm still gonna do it. And I walked out of the bar, and I'll never forget. I didn't even own running gear at the time because I hadn't been a runner for 15 years. And I thankfully I had on these comfortable silk underwear, these silk boxer shorts. So I peeled off my pants and threw them down the alleyway and just started stumbling into the night, heading south, knowing that a town called Half Moon Bay was 30 miles away from San Francisco. And you're right, that night forever changed the course of my life.
What were you unhappy about?
I was unfulfilled. I believe that if I was comfortable, I would be happy. And I was so comfortable, I was miserable. There was really no struggle left. Everything seemed to be kind of so easy. I never had any money, and when I all of a sudden had money, I thought that'd bring like happiness, and it didn't work out. And I think on that night, I was drunk, and I had a little punch. I had a punch, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I thought, do you want to wake up at 50 years old and be on your third trophy wife and driving a red sports car and be fat and bald and miserable, or do you want to kind of follow your passion and do something wild and follow a different course that's more attuned to who you are? I mean, I didn't like being a business guy. I didn't like all the posturing and the pretension and all of that stuff. It just never sat well with me. And I was always uncomfortable in that role. And so I decided to run from it.
It's amazing you had the courage to do it, because safety, we like safety, security, right? And people will endure unhappiness to not have to take risk. And so it's admirable that you had the courage. Were you married at the time?
Yeah, I was married. We had my daughter Alexandria was on the way, so it was terrifying. I mean, you say it's scary. Yeah, I'll admit it was terrifying. And and we can talk further about the 30 years since that happened. I've come to learn myself. That I'm Greek. I'm 100% Greek, and the Oracle at Delphi said, know thyself. And I think what I've learned is that I just like suffering. I like struggle, and I like suffering. I like taking risk, and making a living as an ultramarathoner for 30 years is unheard of. It's unprecedented, unheard of.
Yeah.
And certainly if I'd stayed in the corporate world, I would have been probably retired comfortably. And I don't know. I don't think I'd be happy though. I like groveling and never quite knowing, am I going to make ends meet? And to me, that's thrilling. And it's not unlike running an ultra marathon. The
Yeah.
the finish line is uncertain.
So that's, well, I want to come back to the discussion with your wife when you made this decision. But I first, yeah, to put it in context, I mean, there was no prize money back in the 80s. I mean, you had to win New York or Boston, and then it was very minimal. It was really nothing. It wasn't until, I remember mid to late 90s when I would target a race to go try to win $500, $1,000 for a marathon, and then you got eight Kenyans, dude, eight guys living in an apartment, and they would target every $200 race in the whole region, and then show up with a van and split the prize money. And we were like, come on, for crying out loud. I mean,
Yeah.
throw us a bone. So yeah, it was unprecedented to think that you could make a living doing this. So what, as you sat down, well, let's go back to, how did that discussion go with your wife, and then lead that into what was the strategy? How did you embark upon something that there was really no precedent for?
Yeah, well, to answer the first question, you've got to know my wife. She was my high school sweetheart, So we met when we were 14 years old, in high school. And, I sat down with her at the kitchen table and I said, Julie, I'm going to quit my job and become an ultra marathoner. And she looked at me and she said, I wonder, why it took you so long.
Wow.
So she's very supportive, and I don't know, she believes in me even when I don't believe in myself, which most of the time I don't. So I've kind of had this bedrock of uh, a partner in my life,
It's awesome.
and so she encouraged me to do it. And then, how was I going to make a living? I had no idea. And to be honest, I just thought I'm passionate about it, and you'll figure it out. So, I get asked a lot to talk about the lessons of athletics that translate to business, but more rarely do I get to talk about the lessons from business that translate to athletics. I'm one of the few athletes that actually has a business background. So I kind of segmented, my income silos, if you will. I thought, all right, you might be able to get a sponsor. All right, maybe write a book. You can get a book deal, perhaps. Maybe you can do an endorsement here or something there. And I kind of started, the money started trickling in. And to your point, I quickly realized that it's not the athletes that's winning the race. It's necessarily making a living doing this sport, especially early on. And I thankfully, the marathon was just too short for me because what you just outlined, that dynamic with the Africans just so willing to to do anything to win a $200 purse. And these are great athletes, that train at altitude. Well, all the things that you're competing against. Ultramarathoning, when I first started, I think there were 3,000 race finishers in North America in 1993. So it wasn't a big pool of people that I was kind of immersed in. And I didn't like the shorter races. I liked the longer, grueling races, like the Badwater Ultramarathon that you just spoke about, which is 135 miles across Death Valley in the middle of summer. So I liked doing these things that were so unusual. And when I'd write about them, people were interested, even non-runners. I could see there was something about what I was doing and these other ultramarathoners were doing at these really intense and extreme races that had like human appeal. It was like a common interest story. So I thought maybe you can, not necessarily exploit that, but broaden it, and that you might be able to make some money doing that, and as well you might be able to inspire some people. I've never set out really saying I want to make a lot of money doing this. I just thought I love doing it, and for some reason when people hear about someone running these impossible distances, it makes them think, it broadens their horizon. It cuts down mental barriers in their mind about what is and isn't possible.
Right.
Does that kind of address your question,
Yeah,
Jimmy?
yeah. There's a lot of things coming out. This idea of suffering, I want to come back to. But today I did a little segment when I was on the road here recently, staying in the Marriott, and the only time I could work out was to get up at 4:30 and go to the gym and work out. And it's just I made a decision a long time ago that every day I'm not going to make the decision to brush my teeth or work out. It's just something I do. I don't have to make that decision anymore. I just do it. And a lot of people have excuses. And my old archery coach used to say, if you have an excuse in your pocket, you'll play it before the day's out. Or there's all the reasons you can't do things. And it's really a matter of prioritization and time management. And we really want to inspire people to, especially if it's in terms of their health is at risk, to lace those shoes on and start walking. And for some, it may be to a telephone pole and back today. It may be around the block today, but you got to start, because once you wait too long, it's almost insurmountable to just suddenly I'm going to get in shape. It doesn't work at 55 like it did at 25.
Well, and I think it's little habits that you can change that lead to big results. So, I mean, we all know about, making your bed first thing in the morning. I do 25 burpees first thing on the bed. I just force myself to do it. every morning, and it's miserable and it's painful and it's slow, and I might be hacking, whatever, but it feels so great after I've accomplished that. So I would encourage, anyone tuning into this interview, do 5 burpees when you get up in the morning. Do 3 burpees just out of bed,
Right.
and make that a habit. And these small habits, lead to more habits that are around a healthy, active lifestyle.
Right. This idea of suffering, I've mentioned it several times in that I remember points in my life, and I had Liam Collins on, who was a Delta Force operator, a PhD from Princeton, best Ranger winner. And he said, there were times in my life where I just thought, I haven't suffered in a while. I need to go do something hard. And he was like, there was something inside of him that always said, I need to have something out there that's going to really stretch me, that really push me. And that always made him better. It's counterintuitive because a lot of people just don't like to suffer, and they think, why would you want to do that? But I've always been the same way. And I think that goes hand in hand. And I want to get your thoughts on this. Of some of the best endurance athletes really love the process as much or more than competing. I couldn't wait to fill my logbook out. I took tremendous pride in something that only I saw, which was my logbook,
Mhm.
and to run, 100-mile weeks and to log every interval in an interval session, every split of every mile on every run since I was 9 years old. And I know that's OCD, it's anal retentive, but it was for me. And the process of training, for me, an average guy, I never had a lot of foot speed. I was never going to be a great athlete, but I controlled how hard I worked. And I loved the process so much and was willing to commit to the training that it allowed a guy of average talent to accomplish a lot and do pretty well in the sport. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, everything you said, I completely concur with. I'm not a gifted athlete. I don't see myself as any superhuman by any stretch, but the human body is amazing. And I think if you have the discipline and the commitment and the dedication, that I think anyone can run an ultra marathon or a marathon. And I think that, you know, whether you're doing it just for your own edification or if you like to quantify everything, it's funny. We're both athletes and we're very different in that regard. Like I rarely write anything down. I rarely look. Sometimes I look at my stats. I used to use Strava, and I'm over Strava because it's just like it's chasing a windmill. So I'm very different in that regard. I never run the same route twice. um, I really don't pay attention to metrics because I was kind of getting ruled by metrics.
Right.
So that's just how I work. But I have friends that they do exactly what you said. It's all digital now. It's all mostly with Strava, but they analyze everything they do, and including their sleep, recovery, stride length, cadence, all that kind of stuff. And if that's your internal workings, then the tools available today are amazing. And I've seen how even Fitbit, I worked with Fitbit very early on, and just even the simple thing like a step counter. I got my mother-in-law, who lives in Lubbock, Texas, a Fitbit, and she wasn't real active. And all of a sudden, she she had to hit 10,000 steps every day. And she was doing crazy things. I mean, before she'd go to sleep, if she was at 8,000, she'd go walk around the block.
That's
So
awesome.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, and that motivated her to, now she's very fit. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it takes, right, to get moving. So as you started this at Ground Zero when you were 30, what went on your calendar first, and in terms of training and a goal event? Was it a marathon? Was it an ultra? What kind of where'd you start out?
Yeah, so I ran a marathon when I was 14, right before I quit running. So I knew about, the marathon, and I didn't know about ultra marathoning. And I after running 30 miles that night of my 30th birthday, and I say running, that's a very liberal application of running. I mean, I was hobbling, I was, you know, just getting it done, walking, crawling, whatever. But I made it 30 miles. It took me the better part of 8 hours to do it. So it wasn't a quick 30 miles by any stretch. But after that, I thought, wow, maybe that was like the furthest anyone's ever run, because it was beyond a marathon. And then I was running in San Francisco, and I thought it was pretty. I was running like 5 or 6 miles a day, and I thought, this is you're probably one of the fittest guys on the planet right now. Very naive. And this is 1992,
Right.
and one day these two guys running up a hill. I thought I was really strong on hill. These two guys just blew by me. And not only that, they were wearing like hydration packs. I'd never seen anyone wear a pack when they were running. And they were almost like a different species, these guys. And I was so curious, like, what was that just blew by me? But they kind of crested this hill and kept going. At least I thought so. But when I got to the top of the hill, they were standing up there, or actually doing push-ups up there. And they weren't a very talkative couple guys, but I said, "Are you guys training for something?" And they said, "Yeah, we're training for something." I said, "Well, are there hills involved?" They said, "No, there's mountains involved." And I said, what the heck is it you're training for? And they said, "Well, we're training for a 50-mile race." And I thought, hold it, 50 continuous miles? That's impossible. Like, are there, I said, "Are there hotels or campgrounds?" The guy's like, "No, buddy. The gun goes off, you start running." I'm like, "Well, when do you finish?" He's like, when you cross the finish line." And he said to his buddy, "If you cross the finish line." They kind of looked at me like, there's no way that joker could ever cross the finish line. So I'll never forget. I went to the library, and I did a bunch of research and found out about this 50-mile race, signed up for this 50-mile race, went and did this 50-mile race. And it was, Jimmy, it was the toughest thing I'd ever done in my life. I mean, the tip of my nose screamed in agony. It was so painful. But I managed to finish, and I was sitting in the medic tent, wrapped in a Mylar blanket, having some hot ramen, and I saw those same two guys, and they were high-fiving each other, saying, we qualified. And I'm thinking, what did you qualify for? The insane asylum? I mean, and the guy's like, "No, we qualified for the Western States 100-mile endurance run." And I'm like, hold it, 100, twice as far.
Twice.
Like, where do you sleep? And the guy's like, you don't sleep. You just put on a headlamp. And he's like, yeah, it starts at the base of a ski resort, called Olympic Village. It was Squaw Valley back then. And, you run to the very top of the mountain, and then you run 95 miles beyond that to get to the finish line. You cross a river, you eat along the way. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. But the final thing these guys said as they were, walking away is, "Hey, buddy, you qualified as well." And when they said that to me, I just knew at that instant that if I did not try this 100-mile foot race for the rest of my life, I would never live down that moment. It would stick with me for the rest of my years that they said you qualified, and I never stepped up and did it. So I entered the Western States 100-mile endurance run, and that was 1993.
Wow. Incredible story. They recognized you from the San Francisco day.
They recognized me. I recognized them. And yeah, it's a good story. They were Army Rangers, actually. And I met them at the Western States, and we had some history. So it's in my first book, Ultramarathon Man, but it's a pretty good story.
So I had Sage Norton on, and Sage is she went into ultras after she left the Army, and did quite a few, and she won the John F. Kennedy 50-miler, and has done it 5 or 6 times. But I asked her the hardest thing in terms of the transition from a marathon to ultra marathoning. Her answer to that question, I'm curious your thoughts on it. Hers was, she said, "It all comes down to time on your feet. You have no idea. No one spends that kind of time on their feet." So she's like, I would do things like I'd do my training run, but then I'd come home and mow the yard with a push mower. And then I would walk around the block, and I would do chores. And she said, I just had to spend hours and hours on my feet. But your thoughts on that transition to the impossible miles?
Yeah. I mean, you could probably tell I'm standing right now.
I do. Yeah.
So to her point, I have a commitment. If thankfully I work out of my house, but from the moment I get out of bed and until the moment I crawl back in bed at night, I never sit down. Literally, I have my whole house set up at standing level. So I'm on my feet all day and I'm kind of bouncing around, and I'm mostly barefoot just to condition the muscles and the tendons in my feet. So I never sit down, and that's one way to do exactly, accomplish
Wow.
what she tried to achieve. The thing with the 50-mile race is that it's over during the day. You start in the morning, and most people finish before sunset. The 100, 200-mile races that I'm doing, it's multiple days. So the other thing, you're not just on your feet for 6 or 7 or 8 hours. You're on your feet for 24 or 30 or 40 or 50 hours nonstop. So I also do training at night. I mean, a lot of people, they say, well, I'm going to do my first 100-miler. How should I prepare? And I said, one thing you should do is don't just, keep your routine of running every morning.
Right.
You got to run. You're going to be running throughout the course of the day. So sometimes run at noon in the heat of the day, sometimes run, in the afternoon, and then sometimes run all night. I mean, you're going to have to spend all night running without sleeping. And if you don't experience that, the first time you do it, is not ideal to be doing it during a race.
Yeah. The the amazing thing to me is that some of these the leveling of the playing field, as I talked to Sage, and she's like, I don't even think about it in terms of men and women anymore. Now the sport has changed. I remember, again, I was you really started 92, 93, and I was running in the 80s competitively, but those who went to ultras at that time were not super fast runners. And I don't say that negatively. They're just you didn't have, four flat sub 4 minute milers going to run 50 miles. They just didn't do it. You got guys like Jim Walmsley today, who's like a 401 collegiate miler. I mean, it's insane, the speed. So when a guy that can run four flat is 50 miles into a race, for him to drop 630 miles is not really that big of a deal. It's amazing how it's changed, but women are just as competitive now.
Yeah, I mean, that's one element that you don't hear a lot about, but women, compete. There's not like in golf where there's the women's tees that are a little bit shorter. I mean, the women and the men start at the same starting line, and women routinely win races flat out. In fact, I did some analysis that I put in my most recent book, and I think it was 196 miles, and just statistically,
Right.
women are better than men. So these races, there's races now that are 200 miles, 250 miles, and even further. And so when you look at the results, it just happens to be around the 195-mile mark. Women are better than men. They beat men statistically.
Yeah, I'm thinking Courtney DeWalter, who is just
Yeah,
unbelievable. She's amazing. Lives at
yeah,
Leadville now.
yeah,
And on the cycling side, I don't know how much you dabble over there, but Lael Wilcox is, I mean, just incredible. I mean,
yeah.
I think a lot of them, it's funny because I've coached men and women in archery, and women are way easier to coach. Number one, mentally, they seem to have it together more. They're able to focus better. They're mentally tough, but they're also coachable. They'll listen. Where a guy, he knows everything before you start talking to him. He's already got all these formed opinions. They listen, absorb it, and then apply, and they do incredibly well. But both Courtney and Lael on the ultra cycling, I don't know.
Yeah.
Lael seems to be
No,
able to
I
get
follow. I
most
mean,
of
I
it.
follow a lot of ultra sports. There's a woman named Lynn Cox as well, a long distance ultra swimmer, and she would win almost every race she was in outright.
Yeah. Well, tell us,
Yeah.
let's hit some highs and lows for you. What highest high and lowest low?
I think that the highest high was running a 10K, which you're probably wondering why it's such a short race. But I ran a 10K with my daughter Alexandria on her 10th birthday,
Awesome.
and that was a really special moment for me. Yeah. And lowest low. Yeah, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I DNF'd at a 100-mile race, and uh, by missing a cutoff.
Mm.
So it was a race called Canyons 100. It was a brand new 100-mile race up in California, in the Sierra Nevada. So it was hilly and everything, but there was a surprising heat wave, and the temperatures were around 95 degrees, and none of us had done any heat training in North America because it's been unusually cold, at least here in
Right.
California.
Yeah.
And I threw my electrolytes out within the first 10 miles. I mean, it was so stupid.
Mm.
I'm usually really good with heat, and I just went out like crazy and suffered for 40 miles and literally, got to an aid station and missed the cutoff. And that's never happened to me before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, something like 65% of the runners DNF'd in this race. So, it wasn't like a lot of people, and anyone who DNFs a 100-miler, it's you don't just walk away. Like, these are tough people. Like, none
Right.
of them, including myself, just easily give up. But it trashed me, and more mentally than physically. So, I got to get back on. I've got a couple races coming up, and I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, that stung. Yeah.
Yeah. What of all the ultras you've done out there, and obviously this could be different based on a given individual strengths or weaknesses, but which one do you consider to be the toughest, the most demanding, and why?
I've done a lot of these 6 day, so multi-stage races that are self-supported. They're called the Four Deserts Challenge.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's across the hottest, the driest, the windiest, and the coldest deserts on Earth. So Atacama, Gobi Desert, the Sahara, and Antarctica. And people don't realize Antarctica is actually a desert. It's just a cold desert. And these are 6 day races, and you have to carry everything you need. So you've got a real heavy pack on, and you're sleeping on the ground at night. It's cold. Like Atacama Desert, I think, was the toughest race I've ever done because it was below freezing at night, and then it was near 100 degrees during the day. And yeah, and you're eating freeze dried food, that you're rehydrating at night, so you're not eating really well, and you're not showering or anything like that, and you're not sleeping real well because you're sleeping in a tent with 8 other people, so your sleep's disrupted. And I would say that was probably the toughest race I've ever done.
What has been the most satisfying event you've done in terms of accomplishment for you personally?
I still think the 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days was the pinnacle of what I've done, because one, I was able to pull it off, and there's a lot of uncertainty whether I could do it. Two, my body got stronger over 50 days. The final marathon was the New York City Marathon, and I ran it in 3 hours flat, like 3 hours and 30 seconds. So, which is decent. I mean, New York is not an easy marathon,
Uh,
and to run that kind of time with 49 previous marathons on my legs was pretty satisfying. But the thing with that race, or that event, I shouldn't even call it a race, is, yeah, the all of the back end stuff. You alluded to the logistics and the business model of financing it all, was really fascinating. So it was more of a really big project, like a really big
yeah.
challenging project versus just an athletic accomplishment. Yeah.
That's what I thought was, I mean, I as I, was going through it, I thought, how long did it take him to plan this thing, like to put the whole thing together? How long was it?
It was about 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I am the one thing I'm really good at is knowing that I know nothing. So I know that I'm never the smartest guy in the room. In fact, I'm just the opposite. So I worked with the agency that coordinates the Olympic torch run across the country, and I had them do all the logistics. Like, there was no way I was gonna be able to do all this logistics. And the other thing is that we ran sanctioned and certified courses in every state. So it wasn't like I just crossed the state line and just, GPS 26.2 miles. We did legitimate marathon courses, and the race director set up, their starting line, and we followed their sanctioned and certified course and finished at their actual finish line. So we had a record of actually doing the marathon. But as you show up in Iowa on a random Wednesday, there's not an organized marathon there. I mean, most marathons are on the weekends. So the race directors in 42 states set up their course for us. And I say for us, people could run the marathon with me. So
Yes.
you could go on active.com and sign up. And I think that was really the best element for me, is that, I'd have 50 people, in every state running with me. And it was really glorious, like to run these races with just 50 people versus, and we have a police escort that would close intersections and such when we pass through, versus they wouldn't just close the whole marathon course for 6 or 8 hours like they do during the marathon itself.
Yeah. Well, Dean, I think, yeah, I of course watched the documentary, and you see these people come out, and again, it goes back to when I think of Time Magazine, naming you as 100 most influential people. That has to be gratifying, and justifiably so. And that the number of people you've inspired, and to do something that's good for them, I know it's gratifying to you, and it should be. And I think that's a mark that you've left that's bigger than any, time or distance run or whatever. You've impacted lives in a very positive way. So I thank you for that, and congratulate you for doing that. What would be any advice, anyone out there that's listening, that's thinking, man, I've never really run or biked or anything like that, but I need to do something. What would be some life advice that you might give?
Commit. Commit. So, just go online and find a race in your area, or maybe not even in your area, that is appealing to you. It can be a 10K, it can be a half marathon or a marathon, and sign up. And because once you sign up, you have a target and a date and a clock that's ticking, and that can motivate you to start training for it. Because when you're feeling like sitting on the couch, having a beer and some pizza, you realize, hey, in 6 weeks I got to go run this half marathon, and it really motivates you to get out the door and do the work necessary to run that race.
Right. Well, Dean, where can folks follow along on your journey?
I've got a website. I'm on social media. I think if you just type in my name in a search engine like Google, I pop up pretty high up on the list. So I'm not hard to find.
Yeah, it's a unique name, but there's plenty of pages to go through when you get there. The thing I noticed was these books are almost 20 years apart, not hardly, but you're ageless. You've defied time, Dean. Still looking great.
Well, like I said, I'm 100% Greek, and my mom comes from this island called Ikaria. I don't know if you know the story of Icarus, the boy with the wax wings that flew too close to the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he crashed at this island, this Greek island where my mom is from, and it's one of the blue zones. I don't know if you've ever heard of the blue zones, but there's 7 areas across the world where the native population lived to be the oldest. And Ikaria has the highest concentration of centenarians of anywhere on Earth. And centenarian is someone who lives beyond 100. So maybe I got some good genes.
Well, hey, that's a good gene to have for sure. I recently was speaking to a youth group, and I went through this exercise with them. I had a big rock set up, and then I went a little ways away, about 10 yards. I put another big rock, and I said, okay, that rock represents the day you were born. So write the date down. They all had their notepads. They wrote it down. I said, that rock represents the day you die. Write it down, pick it. You would have thought I asked them to do brain surgery. I have never seen the like of, I mean, the thought process of picking how long I'm going to live for these youth. It was torture for them. But finally, of course, then we went through, okay, what do you want to accomplish in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and to make goals and set plans and all of those things. And it was a fun thing. But the hardest thing I asked them to do was, how long do you want to live? I had no 100-year-old folks though. I think the oldest kid was like 88, and he said, I don't want someone else to be wiping my backside, so I'm going to go ahead and pick 88. Dean, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And a lot of folks out there that are not just interested in your story, but interested in the life that you've lived so far and the influence that you've had. So thanks for all you've done, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on, and I'll keep running until like we said, I'd say my finish line is a pine box. So
well, hopefully that's way down the road.
The old guard rolls and a hero passes by.